Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the very first episode of the Red Shadow Watches The X-Files. I put my preview video up for this a few days back, and that was really just more of an excuse for me to sit around and talk about X-Files stuff, and so is this, in a way. But I just got done watching the pilot episode of The X-Files. That's what this first episode is going to be about. And, going forward from now on, every episode, I'm probably going to take a handy-dandy little notebook right here that I have a lot of my channel stuff written down in. And I'm probably going to go through and make notes as I'm going through each episode as I'm watching, just things to talk about as I go through. This time around, I was kind of feeling under the pressure of timing. Got home from work, I was starving, I wanted to eat, I wanted to watch this episode. My daughter will be over in a little while. I wanted to, sit down and record this. So I didn't give it the kind of attention that I really wanted to. So I don't know how in-depth this video is going to be as to what I want it to be, but anyway, it's the pilot episode, so in a lot of ways it doesn't really matter. I thought I would take a moment to read from Wikipedia the definition of a television pilot episode. Television pilot, also known as a pilot or pilot episode, is a standalone episode of a television series that is used to sell the show to a television network. At the time of its creation, the pilot is meant to be the testing ground to gauge whether a series will be successful and is therefore a test episode of an intended television series. It is an early step in the development of a television series, much like pilot lights or pilot studies serve as precursors to the start of a larger activity, or pilot holes prepare the way for larger holes. I don't understand some of that, but television networks use pilots to discover whether an entertaining concept can be successfully realized. After seeing this sample of the proposed product, networks will then determine whether the expense of additional episodes is justified. They are best thought of as prototypes of the show that is to follow, because elements often change from pilot to series. Variety estimates that only a little over a quarter of all pilots made for American television proceed to the series stage, although the figure may be even lower. Lure? Most pilots are never publicly screened if they fail to sell a series. If a series eventuates, pilots are usually, but not always, broadcast as the introductory episode of the series, which was kind of the point I was getting to, because I was thinking about this earlier today. I couldn't even remember whether or not the pilot episode of The X-Files had actually aired, but it did, September 10th, 1993. But there are some pilot episodes that are never aired, or at least aren't seen until, at least I've found this to be true, once DVD caught on and you started to see these series being released on DVD, you started to see special features, and one of the special features that a lot of television networks would include on their DVDs for their shows would be pilot episodes that were never seen. But the pilot episode of The X-Files was aired, and would be considered somewhat canon in some ways, but in other ways it was not. That was kind of the thing I wanted to highlight in this recording, this little episode about the pilot episode. Of course, in the pilot episode, you're going to get to see the characters and some of the settings, some of the set pieces, locations and whatnot, things like the intro sequence and all that kind of stuff, which, when it comes to the X-Files pilot episode, it actually had a cold open. It was just the really cool X-Files, intro, like the actual logo of the series with the mist in the background, but there was no music, no theme song. That iconic theme song was not there for the pilot episode. And also in the ending credits, it was a completely different song than what was normally played. And then we get to see our characters, our Mulder and Scully, of course, Fox Mulder and Dana Scully, for the first time. And boy, those 90s fashions, though, especially when it came to Scully. Her hair wasn't as bad as I was remembering it, but her clothes, I don't know, those 90s ladies' power suits just don't really do it for me. Thankfully, her fashion and hairstyle molded to the times over the course of the 9 years of the series, and Gillian Anderson's a very beautiful woman, but back then it was hard to really see the woman she would become later on in the series. Mulder, for all intents and purposes, didn't change much over the years, and guys, that wear suits don't really change much over the years either. His hair was pretty epic, if I do say so myself. But so we're first introduced to our characters. You get a little bit of a taste of who they are. Dana Scully is assigned to work with Fox Mulder on the X-Files, essentially as a tool of the FBI to try to debunk his cases with, real hardcore science. The hope was she would come along as a former medical doctor, well, still a doctor, but not a practicing one, and as an FBI agent seeking to distinguish herself. They were hoping that she would come in and say, oh, you think it's aliens or you think it's the paranormal? Well, here's my scientific method applied to what you're looking at. And she almost always had explanations that would kind of fly in the face of his extraordinary thoughts and beliefs. Of course, it was, I guess, for the sake of convenience, that a lot of times she would either almost see something that she couldn't disprove, but something would hold her back, as in the case of this episode when somebody was going to be abducted and she was not quite where it happened at, so she didn't quite see it, of course. Or other times she would see something, but she would just kind of be like, well, that still doesn't mean that it was this or that. But anyway, she's assigned to Mulder's X-Files. She's assigned to try to essentially debunk his work without that being the stated intent, but that was what was going on. She was basically being used, which I think throughout the course of the series she would come to resent that she was being put in that position. But she's assigned to Mulder, and Mulder was just getting ready to go investigate a case of reported abduction in Bellefleur, Washington, I believe it was. Which is awesome that the very first case would take them to someplace in Washington, considering that they filmed the series for the first 5 seasons in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, just over the border from Washington. So topographically, geographically, it's all very, very similar. But anyway, they travel out there and to investigate this case of these kids who are coming up dead, who have no sign of what killed them except for a couple of marks on their back. And they go to investigate this case, and Mulder almost immediately, he's feeling like this is an abduction case because of all the abduction evidence, all the things. I know that I don't know that much about abduction stuff and UFO things, but I know that they drew from a lot of actual abduction scenarios. The writers of the X-Files, Chris Carter and everybody else, drew from actual, reported cases of things that would happen during abductions and whatnot, like electronical devices, mechanical devices malfunctioning, the so-called missing time, things of that nature. And then they incorporated into not only this episode, but many times through the series. Which actually kind of offhandedly leads me around to something I did want to point out. A couple of things that Mulder did, well, a couple of things in general, this being the pilot, things that were different in the pilot from later on in the series. One of those things was when Mulder encountered one of those moments where something started to malfunction with his vehicle. He pulls over, he jumps out, he busts open his trunk, he pulls out a spray paint can of like bright orange spray paint, and he spray paints an X on the road where they had just drove over. Later on in the episode, they're driving down there again on the same road, and bright light flashes. The car dies. They come to a halt. He looks at his watch that he had looked at just before the flash, and it was 9:03. Now his watch was at 9:12. They'd lost 9 minutes of time. And he gets out, and he looks on the road, and he sees the X that he had painted there earlier in their visit. And that was something that he never did again in the series. He didn't mark those spots like that. But he did something else that he didn't really do in the rest of the series. He actually, like literally jumped up and down with his arms up in the air, like, woo! Like he just finally witnessed something for the first time. Maybe that's what they were trying to say, was it was the closest he'd ever been to something, and he was legitimately excited. But I think Mulder and Scully both were depicted by Gillian Anderson and David Duchovny as being a little more goofy and out there in the first episode than they were later on in the series. He was a lot more subdued and serious and almost monotone, as he's known for the rest of the series. And Gillian played Scully a little more. She smiled a lot, and she kind of giggled, and she was like, "Oh, this is so crazy, but I kind of buy it." And she didn't really do that, during the series proper. Well, until later on in the seasons, when things kind of changed around a little bit. But we'll get to that when we get to that. But I just thought that they probably did the best that they could for a first episode, but they honed those characters down into the Mulder and Scully that I would fall in love with as the seasons progressed. Another thing that Mulder did in that first episode and didn't really ever do again was when they went to autopsy an exhumed body that they had brought out of the ground, and Scully went to do the autopsy on this strange corpse. Mulder had this Mac Daddy, just this awesome camera. I almost would want to believe it was a digital camera, even though we're talking 1993. So even though they had cell phones back then, they probably didn't have a digital. But it was an awesome camera, and he's just like snapping shots of the corpse during the autopsy like crazy, to the point where Scully says, "Can you point that flash away from me?" And he never did that again. He just didn't do the photography thing, despite the fact that he probably could have taken a lot of pictures. Maybe that's why they took it out of the show, because they thought, well, if he's always taking pictures, he's going to have all kinds of evidence on film. We can't give it to him that easily. Who knows, though? What are some of the other things I was going to mention? They had... I was going to mention, especially with that X on the ground, that would be looked at again in a later episode, many seasons down the road. Well, once again, that's another one of those things that, when we get to that point, we'll cover that. I just heard the weirdest sound. I'm sitting here talking about an X-Files episode, and I hear something outside that freaked me out. We're off to a good start here, aren't we? Oh, well, okay, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that we're introduced to a couple of FBI officials, higher-ups in this episode, a couple of which are only seen maybe a few times in the first season, but one in particular who sticks around for the entire series, and that's, the actor's name is William B. Davis, but his character name, at least for several seasons, is known only as the Cigarette Smoking Man or Cancer Man, or I like to call him CSM to shorten that Cigarette Smoking Man down, because at Walmart we have CSMs, Customer Service Managers, and that's just kind of funny, the the parallel there between a manager at Walmart and a evil, diabolical figure, shadowy figure in the FBI whose name you don't even know for seasons and seasons. He didn't even have a line in this. I mean, he leans in and whispers to one of his other cohorts, but he doesn't actually speak in the pilot. But he's there. Well, that's about all I can really think of. In the pilot, there weren't any notable... This is something I wanted to do because I did this when I did my online forum version of what I'm doing here, watching an episode and then typing up a little thing. One of the things I like to point out was actors who would later on go on to be pretty famous, who had a part in the X-Files. So it was really cool to see him. But there's nobody really in the pilot episode that fits that bill. I'm also going to try to remember, if I see somebody in one episode who pops up in another episode, I'm going to try to remember to notate that at the time of their second or third appearance. Anyway, yeah, like I said, I wish I would have taken notes for this, but I felt rushed. So we're just going to throw this out here. First episode, we got to break the ice a little bit, and it'll be better in future ones. I'm going to try to watch an episode every day for the days that I have the time, and maybe multiple episodes on days like Wednesdays and Thursdays when I'm off work. We'll see how it goes, though. But anyway, hopefully for any of my subscribers who like the X-Files, who are interested in X-Files, we'll get some useful info out of these, and maybe you'll go back and rewatch it or watch it for the first time. I kind of wanted to come up with a sign-off for this, but all the X-Files sign-offs would just seem overplayed, like, thanks a lot for watching and the truth is out there, or thanks a lot for watching, fight the future, I want to believe, I don't know. So maybe for now I'll just can that idea and just wrap it up and say thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one of these.